Sure. Thanks, Shane. I think if calling it Andrew's presentation with SA Water is kind of bigging up my involvement, it's really me introducing the SA Water folks. So let me start by thanking Scott and Josh for their time. It is, as you said, Shane, it's a great example of how bigger organisations can share their experience and their knowledge with the broader community. Scott is a senior scientist on the water science team at SA Water with 15 years of experience. And Josh is the acting manager of Ops and Maintenance Performance and Technology team with an 18-year career in data and performance analysis. And I would hazard a guess that there aren't too many councils that have senior scientists and things like that, senior data analysts and so forth, purely because of the size and scale of an organisation with like SA Water. So that gives us a great opportunity to plumb the profound depths of their knowledge. Now, I've had a long involvement with SA Water. I've had the privilege of working on some of SA Water's data projects dating back probably longer than I'd care to remember, 20 years probably, where I was involved at a technical capacity at the time in modelling some of the bulk water transfers and the energy costs of moving water around, which were substantial, with an effort to use data and technology to try and shave. I think the objective was to try and shave somewhere between 5 and 10% off of the energy bill. So that was a major project and ran for some period of time, but it gives you a bit of an idea about how long SA Water has been pursuing the use of data to help to drive some of those efficiencies and values and benefits. And the presentation today is not specifically about infiltration as such. It's actually a little bit more about SA Water's approach to data infrastructure and how they manage data. It's like any other organization, there are challenges when you want to get the best value out of your data. You need to have the technology infrastructure. You need to have the right ownership of the data sources and the tech stack that supports the delivery of data to where it needs to be. That topic is something that I'm quite passionate about because I know that many organizations struggle with it, and there's a certain inertia. Things don't happen because where do you even start with some of that? So I'm very keen to hear from SA Water their story and some of the specific challenges that they have. And as part of this, we will learn a little bit about the tech stack that they use. So that's enough from me. Perhaps we can hand over to Scott and Josh to share their insights.
Thanks, Andrew, for the intro. And yeah, you've sort of touched on, a lot of what we're going to talk about today. Let me know if you guys can see my slide. You can? Brilliant. And now let me see if I can drive it. Here we go. So yeah, as Andrew has already mentioned, I'm Scott Buckley. Josh Keane is co-presenting with me today. I've got 15 years experience in the industry. I was very lucky to join SA Water about 4 years ago and sort of start getting involved in their data operations side of things. We built a new team. That was really, really fun experience. And Josh has come into that, and that's been fantastic. In a former life, I actually lived up in Townsville and did some work with Simon back in the day, with Simon and Shane, and we had lots of fun times. So, yeah, hi, Simon. So we'll kick on. Josh, I'll hand over to you to run through the start of the preso.
Yep. Hi, guys. It's nice to meet you all. I thought I'd just start with a brief overview of what SA Water does, our network and our assets. So you can see there's quite a few bits and pieces on this page. It's actually a little dated now. So we're currently spending $1.5 billion over the next 4 years to grow and expand our wastewater and water services to around 50,000 new homes by the 2050s. So quite a bit of investment in this space, and this will be updated with a lot more pump stations and things like that in the very near future. Scott? As you can see, we cover quite a bit of area as well. So South Australia, it's a big state. It's very sparse. The majority of our infrastructure is based around where the majority of the population is. which is obviously around Adelaide, but we are all over the state. And you can see right at the top of, or right up to the north of South Australia there, we've got dedicated remote communities teams, and they supply water to those communities there. So just to give you a bit of size and scale, the drive to Adelaide up to those communities is actually longer than the drive from Melbourne to Sydney. So. And here we have, we're currently underway in a major project which is redesigning data governance. And so the status we are at now, that we have data product owners. They're assigned from the group of general managers, and they come from each of the different areas at SA Water. They sign off on all the final and the major decisions that are made in the data space. The data stewards are responsible for ensuring data consistency, compliance, accuracy, and reliability. That's where Scott and I come in, essentially. So we're at the data steward level, and we are subject matter experts from around the business.
Oh, the camera. And mute.
And yeah, we perform the day-to-day tasks and make decisions based on our areas of expertise. So as I said, we're currently undergoing a major project. The end state of this is to upload all of our data into the Azure cloud. So it's a full revamp of our data landscape. We're migrating all of our BI workloads from on-prem to Azure. And so that'll become part of our new data and analytics platform, so the DNA platform. The project aligns to all of our strategies and future ways of thinking. We're aiming to modernise our data practices and architecture, reduce the security risk. Cybersecurity is a big thing at the moment. We want to simplify our processes so they're easy to understand for analysts and data architects, and then also reduce our reliance on key personnel, which I think is a risk in all big organisations. We rely too much on the people and not the actual skills. So just a bit of background on our team, well, my team. So this team was created in late 2022 to become a centre of excellence for all business reporting in the operations and maintenance group. We've got a pretty simple purpose, which is to make sure the business is making well-informed and data-driven decisions. So we've currently got a team of 10 analysts plus myself, and then we have a manager as well as 3 tech and readiness advisors as well. So we're a fairly large team, but we do find ourselves touching quite a few projects across the whole of SA Water. So I guess where we're focusing today, our operational data comes from a lot of different sources, with our GM Chris Young being the data owner, as I mentioned before. We use Maximo for all works and asset management, Mercury for financial reporting, and SAM is our safety system. And I guess where we're focusing today is our SCADA and PI data. And so effectively, that pushes real-time control and operational data from plants and networks into our PI system. And yeah, we'll focus on that today. So PI time series data can come from SCADA, IoT devices, or we've actually got a manual data entry app that's been designed in-house. Our history can go back to 2001. However, most of the work or the new work, we generally backfill tags for about 2 years. So that gives us enough time for business trending purposes. So O&M is one of the biggest groups, obviously. So we've got over 1,300 staff members, and 3/4 of those are based in the field. So essentially 3/4 of them are relying on this kind of data every single day in their day-to-day work. And yeah, as I mentioned, a few years ago, the business designed an internal manual data entry app. It's worth calling out because it's really filled a lot of the gaps for us in our processes and reporting. So it allows us to overlay data that's manually entered with the other data sources that we have, so from lab data and IoT data. And so they can help contribute to things like operational monitoring and our performance reporting, as well as our regulatory reporting that's due on an annual basis. So the app's pretty extensively used in the regions now, and we're soon to roll out to metro and also maintenance. So they'll use it to capture a few of their pieces of data from out in the field as well.
Over to me, I think. Thanks, Josh. So, Josh has sort of, I guess, taken us through that, like, big picture, the corporate data structure, the data model, the data governance. It's really important to SA Water as a business. Where he and the team are really focused, though, is in operations and maintenance activities. And what's particularly interesting, I guess, about this is it's a bit unique because it's tends to be time series type data that gets generated, as he said, from things like SCADA or IoT devices or those manual entry fields in capture, which means that a lot of those governance projects actually ignore it, and we just sort of have to make it. We do our best to make our time series data or our operations data still adhere to our corporate structures and our corporate governance, but it does sometimes sit a little bit to the side, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But for those who aren't familiar, PI is essentially, in a nutshell, I know I've got a lot of words on the page here, but in a nutshell, it's our way of getting that SCADA data or that time series data out of the complex system of, say, SCADA into a way that the business can actually use it in different ways. So it allows us to use that data to make data-driven decisions. It's great for monitoring, the live monitoring of flows and pumps and valves and tanks and all those treatment processes that you might see in a SCADA environment, but we can get it out of SCADA. It has some extra abilities in terms of being able to have notifications or have rules around that data, so we can have early detections of anomalies or performance issues. So not, things that, kind of go ding before an alarm. And also allows us to do a lot of reporting and compliance tracking, and allows us to automate a lot of our reporting as well. So there's a lot of power in the PI system. PI system comes with a thing called PI Asset Framework, PIAF. It's something that sort of sits on top of the raw PI data, and this is the really important part for us because it organizes the data into a really logical structure. So we kind of have an asset. We sort of follow. You can do it any way you want, but we tend to do it in a way that follows our asset hierarchy. So you'll sort of have like our treatment sites listed, and then below that all the different processes, and then down to sort of like the equipment or the flow or the chemical level. And it means that in terms of reporting, we can kind of roll these data that might be second type data into daily values or monthly values. It allows us to standardize how we do analytics of this data. It allows us to have templates, so it's really easy to roll across all our sites, and it allows us to do that kind of event tracking and notification. So that's where we can do that, sort of catch things before they go out of whack, basically. Why does it matter to us? Well, it simplifies how we access the data. So instead of having to go into a SCADA environment, and do some manual trending one by one, we can kind of pull into dashboards, into Power BI, into Grafana is what we use for live monitoring, into different types of reports. So that's particularly useful. It then allows us to use this data for things like our planning, forecasting. That can be like chemical or growth or anything really. And our asset teams use it to determine out their sort of asset strategies or our asset prioritizations. It does help us troubleshoot, so it lets us, do trending and look at events that have happened, and kind of layer those data together rather than looking at things one by one. It allows us to create reports where we can pull all different types of data, those data that Josh mentioned earlier. So we can look at, our Maximo asset data trended with our SCADA data all in sort of one place. Then, this sort of leads us to start collaborating when it comes to talking about data and operations treatment, operations performance, and lets us start making good insights or have good insights into where we need to make improvements in our operations teams. So what does that look like for us? And by the way, if anyone has any questions, yeah, feel free to jump in along the way. I know we're kind of covering a lot here as we go. So for us, PIF and PI system has become really critical in our treatment operations in particular.
Is this on the I&I meeting?
In our in our planning, really important for our water securities teams. We have a lot of license conditions and stuff like that.
They've got
all good. We have multiple servers, so these there's sort of test servers where we can build things and test out our analysis. We have our production databases that are very critical to actually, our ongoing sort of support of our operations teams. Because of the way this has sort of been a bit of a slow burn, our early iterations of using this system were very experimental. We've got a lot of kind of legacy databases or test environments that are not really used anymore, or they're broken, or they're not very good. So we are going through a process of sort of cleaning this up, but it was sort of that point in time where we were just sort of learning about how to use this stuff and getting our knowledge up. So what we do basically is a lot of the time we get SCADA tags. So, it might be a flow tag or whatever you're looking at. And we basically do a direct map of that tag into a PI pointer or a PI tag. What we then have is a bit of a corporate database cleansing, which removes sort of bad inputs from the SCADA environment, or might be some limits, or some, if a flow meter starts going into negatives or something, it can clean that data up just a little bit. It just sort of touches it and just cleans it up, so it's a little bit easier to do analysis with. Then normally what happens is our different business units will use this data and do their own sort of cleaning or analysis on that tag. And so you can sort of like track this as it goes through. So if you look at that bottom little box, from SCADA, you'll have a source tag. So this is, our SCADA node. I think it's an Ellison bore, and it's a flow totalizer. So when it gets cleaned up in our corporate database or a corporate cleansing database, it gets a new name, but you can see most of the name stays the same. So it just gets, that little name at the start, af.saw.filter. So that just lets you know that it's been cleansed. But then we might do a calculation. So we might want to go, all right, what was the flow for that entire day? And that's a calculation we can do in PIF, and it just happens automatically every day. Once it's set up, it just happens, and that data is available. So, and then you can see it sort of keeps a lot of the naming structure, but we might do something like put a little, dash one day on the end just to signify what that actually means. So that's sort of how the journey, I guess, of the data from that raw source data through to something that becomes more and more useful for our business. We do have a tag management system that was introduced fairly recently. I would love to say that this sort of has all our tag information in SCADA and PI. It doesn't at the moment. It's really mainly for SCADA, so it's super useful for finding that source data, and working out what information you need to pull into a report or whatnot. But it's not at the moment. It's not capturing those sort of like those calculated tags. That's sort of something that would be great to have in the future. What does it look like? So, as I was sort of saying earlier, we kind of break this into different hierarchies. So if you look at this as an example of our regional wastewater treatment plant hierarchy, where under wastewater treatment, you can open it up and you can see different sites, Aldinga and Anguston. You can see under Anguston that we have different sort of sub-layers there that are like flow, influent, primary treatment, secondary treatment, our chemicals. So that's how it's set up in this hierarchical structure where you can sort of drill down to the level that you need. And once you get down to where you want, so in this case, you might be looking at something like our alum usage. We have a whole bunch of information that kind of can pop up about alum at Heathfield in this case, where you can see like our dose rates, what our daily costs of chemical usage was, what our actual chemical, the volume of usage. And so we kind of have, and you can do lots of different calculations. It's just sort of some of the stuff we do for our reporting purposes where we want to see, how we're doing, how we're tracking in terms of chemical budget and things like that. Just sort of another example where we kind of, you might look at our monthly reporting, is something we do as a team, is like things like, what's the volume of water coming into the plant, out of the plant, how much reuse did we have, chemical costs and a whole bunch of stuff like that. So we can, you can kind of, there's no real limit to some extent. We can do an awful lot. And it's a lot of stuff that we used to do manually in Excel, where this sort of, this engine, this PyIF engine, just sort of picks this data up and does this on the fly. It does it in real time, and it becomes incredibly useful in terms of our reporting and our understanding of what's happening in our plants. Because of that situation I was talking about earlier about, we kind of started with a very sort of open and just learning, and people try different things. We've kind of got to the point where we needed governance in this space. So we do have a PyAF governance and standardization program. We've actually, as funded, we have support from GTS to help deliver this project, which is great, because it's a lot of work, but it's really important work. It's about getting best practice in this environment. It's about standardizing those hierarchies I was showing you, because they've all been set up similar but slightly different. We want to mirror our asset structure as much as possible. It's about getting to that point where there is a single source of truth for all our operational data, that, you don't go to an assets team and they give you a different number to our operations or maintenance teams or something like that. We want these to be, everything to be really efficient, the analysis to be efficient, it to be reviewed, standardized, and this just gives us a lot of quality control of that data and what our outputs are. And it's going to introduce a lot of like change management and permissions for different user roles. So really define like what level of access does someone like Josh need versus someone like myself, who's probably in my new role, I'm probably more of a user rather than a creator of data. So my access should be different to his. And things like, that probably matter a lot to Josh and I, things like we have like separate databases for our metro sites and our regional sites. That's just due to sort of historical reasons. But what we'd love to get is sort of like some really unified structures where we're trying to do the same thing, whether it's a regional plant, whether it's a metro plant. We're giving the same outputs, we're giving it to the same people, but we do it slightly differently. So we want to integrate a lot of those things into one big project. Very, very important. It's going really well. It's been running probably, getting close to a year. Not quite. So that's sort of big picture pie and a lot of our operational data. How do we use this data? What do we do with it? We then tend to pull this information into Power BI for reporting. Grafana is our live dashboarding. Excel can still be used for that kind of more ad hoc investigation. So we have a whole series of different sort of ways that we then use the data. So we've created, like our team have created what we call operator dashboards, where it's sort of, I guess, instead of trying to get the guys to just go through lots and lots of different SCADA dashboards, they can kind of go to certain pages and get a bit of a summary of how their plants are going. We have monthly performance reports in Power BI. We have a lot of metro, in particular KPI, because we've got some contractual contractual agreements in that space. Josh is going to shed some more light on that later. There's a lot of performance monitoring, so filter performances, for example. RO performance. There's lots of sort of different performance monitoring we can do in our treatment plants. We even use it with our chemical suppliers to send out automatic notifications for chemical deliveries, basically. So it'll send out some tank levels and, basically has helped automate that process of getting deliveries into some of our larger regional plants. And we're looking at expanding that to more regional plants. That's like a daily email that just comes out automatically. We have some really important sort of big statewide reporting, what we call WIS, Water Infrastructure Zone reports. So that's sort of a statewide water balance. So that big map that Josh showed earlier, that's sort of, we get all those different inputs into one big report. Met Daily is our daily. For our reservoirs, the guys go out and take daily readings and they put that into capture, and it all kind of comes into this environment. As I mentioned earlier, water securities. Some of this stuff's incredibly important because it's our licenses with our due and whatnot, where we can be pushing some of our bore licenses. We have network monitoring and notification set up, so things like pressures in a network, and Josh is going to show an example a bit later of one of those. Our manual data entry we've mentioned a couple of times, so that capture app is really important. We have our analytical control in our wastewater teams get entered, and so the guys are out there. They do their AQCs, they enter it into capture, and they get an automatic email, sort of within seconds, basically letting them know whether they've passed or failed their test. So that's been a real process improvement and efficiency improvement. In the past, that was a very manual task. It would take a couple of weeks for them to find out if our instrumentation was actually passing our AQCs. And then there's a whole bunch of different models. The one that probably matters to Josh and I is a lot of our chemical forecasting for our budgeting and our planning. So we do a lot of chemical forecasting for the water treatment teams and wastewater treatment teams. So this is an example of a operator dashboard. It's very simple. Like, the idea of this is to be simple. It can be essentially it's live data. So the data is live. We can have some other data sources come in from things like our laboratory teams and cross-reference across that. We can have a bit of a stoplight system here as well. So if turbidity gets out of whack, it'll come up. So it's not the be all and end all, I guess, but it's a really easy way for guys to flick through and get a summary of how the plant's going. They can trend, they can drill into this data. Our technical support people tend to use it a lot as well. So coordinators and our TPOs can sort of get in there and have a look at a whole range of plants that they're responsible for, and work with the operators to make sure everything's going well. A similar one for our we have iron removal plants down in the southeast of the state. So they're sort of mini treatment plants. All it is pre-chlorination and filtration of our some high iron bore waters. But yeah, we've sort of set these up fairly recently to help the guys down there as well, so they can look at bore levels or their lab data, whether it's in or out of spec, tank levels, flows. So it sort of brings a lot of things into one place where they might have had to flick through 3 or 4 different reports plus SCADA to get this information. We can kind of get it all into one place for them and make it a lot more efficient. And then we sort of go up a step where we start bringing it into Power BI, and we tend to use Power BI more for long-term trending and reporting. So we can do things like our historical flows at a certain plant. So you can see in this graph, we're looking at Heathfield wastewater treatment plant, what's coming into the plant month after month, effluent coming out. In this case, we're doing a lot of discharge to environment. We're recycling or reusing, a very small proportion of the water. We have some reuse customers in our regional areas. Some are like 100% reuse, others not so much. And so we can kind of look at bigger, larger trends, right up to the point where we can actually do some like aggregated reporting. So all wastewater regional plants, how much effluent did we sort of pump out in the month? How much water did we reuse? And a lot of this sort of goes into certain monthly corporate reports, or like it gets used every month. And what would have taken the team in the past quite a lot of effort every month. It's still a lot of effort, but it's definitely a lot shorter and a lot quicker, a lot more automated than it used to be. That combination of using that PI system and the analytics of the PI system, and then putting it into a nice automated report, is really efficient for us. And sort of something that's a bit different, I kind of touched on it earlier, is our AQC program. So every month we have a laboratory, I'm sitting right next to it actually, that sends out, like blind samples to our teams, and they do some tests out on the site. So we've sort of automated that with our capture app. So they enter their results, they get that instant pass fail. But we've also automated the reporting side of it as well, because what used to happen is someone would sit down and spend a whole day going through spreadsheets, trying to work out who's passed and who hasn't. And, as Josh mentioned, it's a large team. So when we start talking about operations being field operations, maintenance teams, wastewater teams, and water treatment teams, it's a lot. So this process is now essentially 100% automated, where the guys enter their values, they get told if they passed, and this all just gets calculated up to, for September last month, they passed 93% of their tests in the wastewater team. They didn't do them all, so there's a pass and a completion result, and then it's sort of broken up into sub teams. So you can see the Southeast team did a fantastic job, 100% pass, 100% completed, and the other teams, not doing badly, but they got some areas to improve as well. And it means that this report is live. The coordinators can actually go and see if someone's struggling, or where the issues could be. Something that sort of only really happens once a year, and it's sort of the bane of our existence, Josh, is annual reporting. I'm sure we probably all have some of this. We do a lot of it, and a lot of these measures end up getting rolled up into our EPA report. So we submit 25 regional wastewater treatment plant EPA reports to South Australian EPA. These are now, with the power of coding, of Python scripting, we've essentially fully automated this. So we can kind of press a button, it'll grab all that data and spit out a report. So that's a very recent improvement, and that's saved a couple of weeks of hard work. A lot of work to get there, but it's saved a lot of time. Same with our Department of Health report. That's one report, but it's got lots of different sites in there. So it's a lot of data, very similar data to the EPA reports, but it's in one report. So similar thing, we press a button and it spits out a report. So this is the first year we've done it this way, and it's saved a lot of time. And then there's a whole bunch of these sort of MPI, MPRs, our NGERS, our National Greenhouse Emissions Report, Cat 7 reporting, and we also report to the Essential Services Commissioners of South Australia, who is our SA Water has a regulator that we have to report to. So all of this sort of operational flow type data, we can, we save a lot of time, a lot of efficiency having the PI system help us do the calculations. And I guess I just wanted to sort of show you, what our big picture is. And a lot of this is a work in progress, guys. So it's not, I'm not going to pretend we are perfect at any of this, but this is kind of, I think, something that we're striving towards, which is having the right data tools for the right level. So what I showed you earlier, some operator dashboards, that's sort of the operator level. It's about monitoring the performance right now of a plant, using that live telemetry, using what we call water scope. That's our laboratory data that's being tested in our own labs here at SA Waterhouse, including their manual data from capture. And then we are trying to build what's probably newer for us as a team is building some really team level insightful reports So for our field water quality team, this is where we're starting to bring some of that data we're talking about at the operator level, but combining it with things like our customer complaints, where they're happening, what type of complaints they are. That comes out of our Maximo system, SAM actions and incidences, so they can start really working through where the issues are or what they need to do there and how they're, whether they're closing those out correctly, the number of work orders being completed out on site, and a lot of compliance and water quality performance for them. So trying to get that into one view for a team is quite a lot of work. It's quite difficult, but it's a really great outcome. And then right at the top, we have our performance management framework, I should say, not performance management performance, but performance management framework, which is sort of more of our senior manager reporting. And so that's sort of that another step up again, where it's overall safety, overall, employee experience and works management, asset performance. So that's quite new as well, and that's been really, really well received by our our senior management team of O&M. So our general manager Chris Young has really, I guess, led that requirement, and it's been really well received and being promoted across all of SA Water, really. So I would, we sort of expect other business groups to sort of probably do similar things in the future, kind of having a centralized area for all performance. I'll hand back to Josh, who's going to dive into some of the Metro P&T, what we call our P&T Alliance reporting.
Yep. So just a couple of quick examples from me about how, I guess, some recent examples how we've used the Pi time series data. So this is an example of one of my old dashboards in the P&T Alliance space. And so it's just a quick example of rolled up Pi data that informs the business and the KPI compliance in the Metro space. So you can see I've circled a couple of examples of failures or soon to be failures that have been highlighted. So it's showing a KPI fail for ammonia at Bolivar, and then also a couple of little problems with nitrogen at Bolivar and Christie's Beach as well. So this data is incredibly important for commercial operations, obviously, because we've signed agreements with external providers such as Suez, and any KPI fail can actually cost Suez money. So it's important for this sort of data to be not only accurate but timely as well, so they can work through their invoicing at the end of each month. The ammonia non-compliance there, you can see the rule is specifically they need to have 95% of samples that are less than 2 milligrams a litre. And you can sort of see in the screenshot on the right-hand side that they've failed that by having a few that didn't meet it. Next slide, Scott. And this is another one from our Metro space. So this is where we've used an event frame in Pi that tracks UV disinfection KPI compliance out at Happy Valley. So effectively, the three business rules that we use are on the screen on the left-hand side there in the green sort of text. And if those three business rules are true, then the event frame will generate. So any period longer than 10 minutes in that case is deemed a fail. So there's a couple of reasonably obvious rules that are built in, so that the inlet flow tag having to have a minimum value is one. So there has to actually be water flowing through the UV unit, and the outlet valve has to be open as well. So as long as there's water tracking through the system, then they will be judged against that KPI, essentially. And this is just another recent example. I think it was only from a couple of weeks ago. So this is our regional network monitoring staff are actually able to use the time series data from Pi to burst the diagnosed to diagnose a burst main before SCADA or any customers actually let us know. So you can see in the left-hand graph, there's a tank out at Milcowie in regional SA. It had started, the tank level has started to drop quite gradually over a period of half a day or a day. And then you can see it drops right off. And there's a bit of a messy yellow squiggle there. That's actually the outflow. And when the operators got to the tank, they realized that was actually a result of the water vortexing out of the tank. It was coming out that quick, and so it was splashing past the sensor that was telling them the tank level. So it's all well and good. We know there's a break somewhere, but we don't know where yet. So that's where the graph on the right hand side helps. So that is a pressure reducing valve out of Warnertown, which is just upstream from where the tank is. And you can see that the pressure of that dropped right off about the same time as the water started vortexing. So yeah, I guess that's a real time example of how our operators are able to quickly find a problem and then send crews out to fix. So I guess that brings us to the end, Scott. So
yes, it does. So I think we gave you a lot of information, and we probably didn't draw a breath to let you guys jump in with any questions as we went. But we're happy to obviously take any questions or to focus in on anything that of particular interest. I appreciate there was quite a lot of a brain dump there. Yeah.
I think you've stunned everyone.
I've got a question. A couple of questions, guys. We talked about before with your governance and standardization. What was the biggest challenge there? Was it aligning the hierarchy with the asset management system?
To be honest, the biggest challenge was getting it started. So it's sort of something that's sort of been in the works for quite a long time, and just getting the funding right and sort of coming back to it, and so it's great that we finally got it going. In terms of I think everyone's fairly on board about the hierarchies approach. It's probably more about that creating that single source of truth, because we have different teams using the data similar, like the same raw data, in slightly different ways, and even defining what a day is. So most of SA Water a day is midnight to midnight. We have certain teams, due to historical reasons, a day is 8 a.m. to 8 a.m. And so, a day is different, and that becomes, really tricky when we're trying to get a single source of truth and how we handle stuff like that. So I think also some of the standardization of calculations and templates, like the GTS guys have got some really great ways of finding some efficiencies in some of our analysis, but then we've got to kind of weigh up, we're using maybe more tags, or it gives us something slightly different. So we're still working through a lot of, it's very early days, to be honest. So we're working through a lot of that, but I think that the biggest one is sort of the definitions of, what is that, that truth of data is quite difficult at times. Josh, is there any others that stand out to you?
Yeah, I was going to agree on the I think it's very easy for SA Water to invest money in things out in the field, but we haven't really had a big investment in our technology space for quite some time, and as a result, we're using some reasonably outdated software as well as ideas. And so being able to finally throw some money in the direction of the issue is great. But yeah, bringing along a few of the staff that I guess have been around for 15, 20 years that haven't really had to worry about any of these practices has also been an interesting part of the journey.
Okay. And I'm particularly interested in that automated Python report for your EPA reporting.
Yep. Yeah. Anything in particular?
Have your own coders there, or?
Yeah, so this is probably where we are lucky. So the genesis of our team, like that, when I joined 4 years ago, this data team was really a production, what we call production and treatment. So it was very treatment focused. And so at that time, we basically had engineers who were really good at data doing this sort of stuff. When we went through a bit of what we called an operations realignment, and we got a dedicated data team, which is the team that Josh is sort of leading at the moment. And we got to build that team up and we brought in new expertise from outside. And some of these people are pretty amazing. So they have that Python, R coding skills. So most of these were done by one of our guys called Kyle Hutchins. He's fantastic. So the data was all there, but we sort of gave him this mission earlier this year, basically to write some Python scripts, and basically it grabs the data, it does the calculations, and it spits them out into Word reports. And they're relatively, like, they're pretty much formatted and everything. So internally created, very much a new capability that we're lucky to have. We didn't have that. 3 or 4 years ago, we didn't have that internal capability within our own operations group in particular. We're very lucky. Yeah. And there's no other data team in SA Water as big as ours now. I would say even technology doesn't have a data team as big as us.
And I think it's your next slide, your event frame. The next slide.
Trying to. I think Josh had one somewhere, didn't you, Josh?
Yeah, so it's just about creating a bunch of rules of if and when.
Yep. Pretty much, yeah. Yep.
So yeah, in this case here, if all those 3 rules are met, then it will generate an event frame. So we use that to generate things like emails to operators to ensure they're on top of the processes that are happening at the plant. So in this case, this would generate a notification for the commercial ops team to let them know there's been a UV fail, as well as a notification for the actual team at the plant, so they can shut down the UV treatment unit.
Okay, great, thanks.
They're really powerful event frames. We probably don't use them enough, but we sometimes use it for very bespoke activities. So it might be like some kind of condition that Department of Health is looking at for a wastewater treatment plant, and we can use event frames to sort of like do a historical analytics. So how many times did chlorine residual fail or something like that? And it's been really useful a number of times in reporting back to Department of Health for our reuse waters to either sort of come up with a better agreement, or to sort of say it's not really needed, like what you think's happening isn't really happening. So event frames are pretty fantastic, probably underutilized by us, but we kind of know that we can do more with them. We can even use them for the quality of the data. So we have, in some places, we have them for things like stale data from our SCADA system. So if a value hasn't changed for more than 12 hours, it'll send an alarm and say, hey, there's something wrong here with this SCADA node or this communication network. Yeah, they're really great.
Keith, Shane here. We deploy event frames in the Infiltration project, but we probably haven't burdened people with the technology terms, but we can, that can be illustrated there. And you're right, event frames it's an extremely powerful tool.
Yeah, often we just say notifications. You will get a notification that this has happened. Yeah, as you say, some of the terminology does get confusing. Any other questions or areas of interest? I think, probably can definitely say Josh and I are very happy to, talk to people beyond this session. I think, Scott, you've got a question?
Yeah, you said these are mainly for operators, but they can be kept inside like the main office so the other people can look at it as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the power of our Pi system, is to kind of get the data out of SCADA or Excel sheets or whatnot that people used to do, and make it really open for the entire business. So we have teams called Treatment Expertise. So they are really heavily users of this data for piloting or treatment efficiency projects. Our asset teams use this data for sort of long-term planning. Our water securities teams actually, Andrew mentioned earlier, we didn't talk at all about, our major pumping. Like, this is vital for our energy monitoring and our major pumping initiatives, which is very much a cost-saving sort of initiative. And our ZCEF, which is our zero cost energy future, our sort of solar project and energy projects that we have, all rely on this technology. So definitely not just for operations, but it's vital to operations. If that answers your question.
Yeah.